Kirby Kelly was just 4 years old when she walked in on someone watching pornography. And this led to a full-blown addiction that would take years for her to break. Her journey to freedom began freshman year of college on a camping trip.
Kirby Kelly is a young author, speaker, and podcast host. She also produces content for social media platforms, focusing on the Gen Z and millennial age groups. Knowing firsthand what it's like to battle sinful habits, Kirby says surrendering to God is the key. In her new book, You Can Be Free, Kirby outlines a plan to help others break unhealthy patterns and find peace.
And Kirby Kelly joins us now. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm so
happy
excited
to have you back. 4 years old.
Yep.
You were exposed to pornography. I mean, I cannot imagine. What was that like for you? What happened?
Oh my goodness. I mean, being that young and seeing something that you truly can't describe, that you truly don't know, it genuinely started as curiosity. Like, what am I looking at? What is this thing that I've never seen before? And then being exposed to it again when I was 7 years old, and then being exposed to it again when I was 10 years old. It just naturally developed into this curiosity, this intrigue, and knowing the way that we as humans are wired, it just woke up something within me that didn't need to be woken up that early, and it exploited something that truly was meant to glorify God, but I was introduced to it in a way that didn't. So it truly was just a war within me that I couldn't even describe.
Now, you were 14 years old when you did give your life to Jesus Christ, an amazing experience at a Christian camp. And so you became known as the Purity Girl.
Yes.
And you started, creating content, Christian content, but behind closed doors, you were still struggling with this issue of pornography. Talk about how you were able to balance. I mean, what was that like?
Oh my gosh. Well, if anybody is struggling with habitual sin, you know it is a balancing act for sure. I mean, no one would have ever guessed, if anyone from my high school sees this segment, no one would have ever guessed that the Purity Girl had a porn addiction, right? And so dealing with this secret sin in isolation, not telling anybody, nobody knew, it was defeating. I felt like a hypocrite. I was stuck in shame. And even though I put my efforts towards it, my willpower towards it, did my best to be free, I couldn't do it. I couldn't be free of my own accord, of my own effort. And so this duality, this war of, I want to do what God has called and purposed me to do. I want to walk in freedom, but my flesh is desiring this thing. There was just a lot of confusion, and it wasn't until I got to college that I not only believed I could fully be free, but I began to walk in the fullness of freedom from this addiction.
I mean, this addiction really did a number on you. You struggled with depression and even suicidal thoughts until one day you went to a Christian retreat, a camp again, and something happened that really helped you on the journey to get free.
Yeah, so when I was 14 years old, that's when I had this radical encounter with the Lord, where I truly believed, one, Jesus died for my sins and I can walk in the newness of relationship with him. But it wasn't until I went to this camping retreat with some of my sorority sisters when I was a freshman in college that I began to actually see freedom unfold in my life in this area of habitual sin and addiction. And it all started because these ladies created a space, created an environment where it was safe. It was safe to confess. It was safe to be real. I knew that I would be met with truth. I knew that I would be met with accountability, but I knew that I would be met with compassion and grace and empathy and understanding for my humanity, for struggling with sin like everybody does. Sin doesn't discriminate. And I quickly realized at that retreat that I wasn't the only girl who was struggling with this addiction, with an addiction to pornography. And for the first time in my life, I confessed, but also for the first time in my life, I truly believed, well, if these girls can walk out freedom, then so can I.
You later met with one of the sorority sisters. You went to her apartment and you confessed really what was going on with you personally. What did that confession do for you, and how did it begin to bring freedom in your life?
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, we went through tons of Kleenexes because I was crying my eyes out, bawling my eyes out, truly unloading things that I hadn't talked about since I was 4 years old when I first walked in on it, right? When I first was exposed to it. So it was, as much as there was kind of a fear to confessing this and bringing what was in the darkness into the light, there was such a relief when that release happened, when I confessed to community that I trusted, that had walked out freedom for themselves. And I wasn't met with the condemnation I had towards myself. I wasn't met with the disgust that I had towards myself. I wasn't met with all the hurt and the trauma and the lies and the labels I put on myself. No, I was met with compassion. I was met with the truth of the gospel and how because of Christ we can walk out freedom, we can be delivered. It requires work on our end, but it's all because of Jesus that we can do it. And it was a life-changing conversation, a life-changing experience for me that happened on my sorority sister's couch.
That's amazing. And you know, people who are watching right now, Kirby, are probably saying, where do you even begin? Because this is like a multi-faced issue. There's layers to this. Where does someone start the process if they want to be free?
Yes, confession. Confession is the first step that we need to take. And in my book, I wrote a book called You Can Be Free. And in it, that's the first step of this battle plan that I've orchestrated that anybody can apply to whatever sin that they're stuck in. I mean, it could be a porn addiction, it could be, you know, alcoholism, it could be a shopping addiction, social media, even just lies and shame that we're believing from past mistakes. And so the first step that I detail in that is confession and finding a community to be raw and real with, because I think that's the first and necessary step, because once you bring that thing that's been in the darkness and festering into the light, that thing that's been just like molding and toxic to you can finally be molded into what God wants to purpose you for. And freedom is part of that purpose.
That's so, so good. I love that. You talk in your book about the word Shema. And what role that plays in our getting free from addictions and habitual sins. Talk about what that word means and the role that it does play in helping us to get free.
I love that word. That's one of my favorite Hebrew words. It's Shema. And it's found in Deuteronomy chapter 6, the Shema prayer. This is one of the first prayers that the Israelite people or the Jewish people would teach to their kids, would teach to their family. So this was really ingrained in the culture. And at the beginning of this prayer, it's one that we all know very well. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. Later, Jesus repeats this and adds mind, which I think is interesting. But that first word for hear is Shema. But it doesn't simply mean to just hear these words. Shema means to listen and obey. It's listening with that intention of I'm going to do what God calls me to do. So I'm going to listen to what God requires of me, asks of me, whether it's surrendering something, picking up something and saying yes to something, and I'm going to follow through with obedience. And so many of us are looking for the Lord and asking God, what do you want me to do? I want to be free. Like, what do I need to do? But we're stubborn and we're unwilling to do the hard work, the surrendering, the severing that He requires of us to walk out freedom. It requires obedience. It requires us to listen and obey if we want to be free.
That's so powerful. Another thing you talk in your book about is setting red light zones and green light zones. What are some examples of this?
Yes. So if we're just like analyzing the sin that I was in specifically, for me, when it came to red light zones and green light zones, it's more so like what is permissible, what is beneficial, what is truly good, and not just serving me, serving the Lord, bringing honor to Him. So when it came to my porn addiction, things that were in the red light zones were I'm not going to use my phone after a certain time. I'm going to download certain apps to protect my eyes and to protect my search engine. I'm going to delete certain apps. I'm going to use the university computer instead of my own computer so that there's that level of accountability. I mean, I wanted to set up precautions and protect myself because I knew myself. I needed to be honest with myself that this is something I'm struggling with, so I need to set the boundary a few steps back. It's not just don't go to this website. It's let me take away everything that even gives me access to be able to do that thing. Let me remove the temptation that leads me into my sin. So those were red light zones. And as I developed in discipline and in understanding the truth and being more solidified in my convictions, some of those things eventually moved back to the green light zone. I use my phone now. I use my own computer now. But there are some things that will forever live in the red light zone, certain apps, certain search engines, certain behaviors that just will forever live in that red light zone because there's just no compromise with that. I want to live out the freedom Christ won for me.
Wow. Well, we could go on and on and on. Quickly, what do you want people taking away from your book?
I want them to know that freedom is available for them. It doesn't matter what you've done. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter the names and the labels people have called you or that you've called yourself. Stop holding yourself hostage and start living out the freedom that Christ willingly gives to you. And I'm hoping my book is just a resource that compiles all this truth from the Bible together and empowers people to walk out that freedom.
Well, it is so good. And we want to thank you so much for being with us today.
Absolutely.
Amen. Kirby Kelly's new book is called You Can Be Free, and it's available wherever books are sold. Kirby, thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah,
God
definitely.
bless you.